Assalamu alaikum, ya'tikum al-afiyah. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Dr. Yusuf معرفي, prosthodontist. Today, inshallah, I will be talking about a quick short presentation about implant components, what are the parts we use, not the surgical parts now. I will be talking about only the prosthetic part and what we really need after the surgeon places the implants. So first of all, we will talk about implant dentistry. What does implant dentistry mean? As we know, it's the selection, planning, development, placement, and maintenance of restorations using dental implants, and that's in the glossary of prosthodontic terms. Dental implant is that piece of implant which is implanted into the oral tissue beneath the mucosa and the periosteal layer and within the bone, of course, to provide retention for that screw or titanium screw in order to put later on a crown or a prosthesis on top of that implant. So if we take a look at the anatomy of the implant, we will see the implant part, which Dr. Abdullah was talking about, and then that's beneath the periosteum or within the bone, and then this is our part, which is the abutment, and then we place the crown over the implant. There are a lot of implant designs out in the market which were used a long time ago, since implant was first introduced and was started. Bladed implant, ramus, subperiosteal, transosseous, transitional, mini implants, a lot of implant forms and designs were out in the market. Industrious implants, that's what we use nowadays. Different shapes, different designs were used, some with grooves, some with holes like so, to get the bone inside that hole and get to hold the implant in the bone. This is an example of the industrious implants, which is the blade type, which was used long time ago. I saw some patients I saw in my practice still having those industrious or blade type of implants. One of them كان الوالد الله يرحمه كان عنده implant كان عنده من هذا الtype. He had this kind of an implant, and then unfortunately we had to take it out and remove it because of the implant diseases that he got later on after like 20 years. This is another type of the implant, subperiosteal implant. We don't use anymore, but it rests on the surface of the bone under the periosteum. So this is the typical form of implant what we use nowadays, and of course, implant improves a lot of our life, most of our life. In regards if we don't have any like any dangerous cases for elderly patients, as well as some other patients when we don't have enough or we don't have or they lost a tooth or something. And as I always say, as we know, that the most accurate or the best solution to restore teeth is the implant if all the factors are there and we can place an implant. The goal is, of course, to improve the life as well as place or have a good tooth or crown after placing the implant, where the patient can function his life and chew and bite on implants. Surgical part, Dr. Allah talked about it already. We place the implant in the bone, let it heal for a while, and then we put our abutment, and then, of course, we make our impression to restore that space. So the components, we'll start talking about the healing screw, which is the component of the industrial dental implant system used to seal. That's very important, to seal usually an interim basis and dental implant body during the healing phase. So after the healing phase, This is the implant placed, and then that's the healing screw. So the purpose is to maintain the patency of the internal threaded section for the subsequent attachment of the abutment during the second stage surgery. So we let this for a while, 2 to 3 months, it depends on the surgery and the bone, and then we come back and we put the cover screw, and then we start making our procedures for placing or restoring that tooth. So the other piece of the implants that we use here is the healing abutment, which is the intramedustial dental implant abutment. It's any dental implant abutment used for a limited time to assist in the healing or modification of the adjacent tissue. It's very important to use the right healing abutment so that we can get a good emergence profile, especially in cases of anterior restorations, as well as sometimes the posteriors as well. We care about the healing, the emergence profile of the crown. So using the proper healing abutment, which I usually like to advise and recommend to my surgeon, to use one size bigger than the dental implant to get a nice emergence profile. So here I'm mostly showing the Noble Biocare, which I was trained on back in the Medical College of Georgia, and that presentation was one of my old presentations that I have adjusted nowadays. So you will always see a lot of implant components for Noble Biocare. But the concept is all the same. Killer implants are almost the same in regards to restoration. So this is the healing abutment. We have to be very careful when we're placing removing the healing abutment to make our impression and not to get it drop in the patient's mouth and swallow it. So we use hand torque drivers. Some of them have slots, some of them hex, and some of them are square. It depends on the implant system itself. So this is the slot screwdriver, okay, used to remove and replace also, the retention screws or the screws for the abutment, and as well as the healing abutments. That's another type of the screwdriver, hex. And then we have different types of screwdrivers, as I said, to replace the abutment screws for the standard or conical abutments. Square, okay. So what are the components of the implant supported restoration now? This is the implant fixture, and then we have the abutment. Inside the abutment in the slot we have the screw, which we have to tighten very well, and according to manufacturer, we have to go with the recommendation. And then we have the retaining the screw. Sometimes we use PVS to block this hole or the axis, to block it before we place our screw type restoration, and then we put a composite. I don't really much use PVS. I use cotton pellet, small cotton pellet, to block it out, and then I put the composite. That's the screw retained abutment, which I showed you earlier, and the abutment is the cement restoration. We only use the abutment, and then we screw down the abutment, and then we cement retain the crown as usual as we do for the conventional crowns. And here is the screw, which is this one here, and then, as I said, we place the crown on top. Of course, for each implant system, we have a torque guide that we have to follow in order to get a better result and not to get a screw loosening or screw breakage. For the screws, we can manually, for the temporary abutment, healing abutment, healing caps, we all do it manually. And then we go with the prosthetic screws. It depends on, again, on the screw type and the manufacturer recommendation. We have to follow this, as I said. And of course, we all know this is the torque wrench. And again, I'm sorry, only Noble Biocare, because that presentation was prepared back then when I was a resident back in 2006. So We got the case ready for impression now, so we have to have the parts ready as well. The first part, what we need is for the impression making is the impression coping. Impression coping is to that device to register the position of the dental implant or the dental implant abutment retentive to adjacent structures. And most such devices are indexed or to assure the reproducible three-dimension location of the implant. Different colors, depends on the size, of course, we all know that. And here we have closed tray versus open tray. The second important part that we need as a prosthodontist or as a started dentist is the implant analog. This is where we place the impression coping to that part and then put it back on the impression, send it off to the lab to get it mounted or poured. So we have two types of impression techniques. The first type is one type is the open tray, where we have our tray, we make a hole over the impression. After we place the impression, we have to indicate where the impression coping, goes with the tray, and then we make a hole, and then we start making our impression. Here, excuse me. How do I play the video? All right, sorry about that. So here, after we make our impression, we put back the impression coping inside the impression or the spot, and then we already screwed that implant analog, and then we do our soft tissue casting procedure, and then we put it to get it ready for fabrication of the implant. So that's the closed tray technique. Here we go, that's the position of the implant, of course. We unscrew the impression coping, and then we select our prosthetic abutment, and then accordingly, this is the prosthetic abutment. Put it on. If we need to fabricate a finish line or refine our finish line, we can do so. Okay? So this is the open tray technique here. Again, we put the impression coping first, screw it. Light body material around the impression coping. So this is the first part of the impression, the video. That was a closed tray. I'll show you the open tray later on. Okay, so that was intraorally. Unscrew the impression coping, put the healing abutment back on. Okay, so we got the impression made, and we have them casted or mounted, and then we have to select sometimes we do temporary restorations over the implants as a screw retained or a cement retained implant temporary restoration, or sometimes we do the RPD flipper. So again, we have to use also a certain component of the implant parts, which is the temporary abutment, to fabricate our temporary restoration. We put the temporary abutment back on the implant here, on the implant in the cast. I have made an Essex appliance or a suck down shell with the wax up, of course, and then I make a hole over here and I flow in the resin to fabricate my temporary abutment. This is the final restoration. Back then we used to use the metal collar because it's in the posterior part and it's not anesthetic zone. So the prosthetic implant is the portion of the dental implant that serves and supports to support and retain any fixed or removable dental prosthesis. We have different types of abutments. Again, this is a Noble Biocare. We have also try-in abutments. Sometimes we have a doubt of the angulation of the implants before we make our final restoration. We can use the try-in abutments and check the angulation of the implant before we do the final impression. So different angulations, and we also have another type of abutment which is called the aesthetic abutment, the corneal abutment, and that's very nice to be used in the aesthetic region, in the front region. Also, other type of aesthetic abutments where we can prep in the lab. In this case, for a bridge over here or there, I have prepped my abutments to get them as much as I can parallel for a good path of insertion for my prosthesis. Also, there are custom abutments where we can cast metal to them. This is wax, made of wax here, so we can wax up this abutment and then cast it to metal. We use this for implant over dentures and also other type of single prosthesis or FPDs prosthesis. In this case, for example, I have, my surgeon put 4 implants over this area, 4, 5, 6, and then he placed 1 more here, which is angled. What I basically did, I put this implant to sleep and I couldn't use it or use it for my restoration. So I went up and I made my impression. Of course, I used castable abutments, which are which I have casted, UCLA abutments. The last implant here was over there, and I couldn't use it, of course. So I used single, and then cantilever off. Casting procedure, and here is the coping. I have to try the coping first, and then, of course, we went ahead with the final prosthesis. As I said, metal collar. My program director was a big fan of metal collar in posterior restorations. So here I used PVS to block the access hole, and then, as I said, this is a single, and then cantilever off the premolars. Forward, cantilever forward. And that's the final restoration. Okay, there are another type of prosthetic abutments which are called the multi-unit abutments. That's what we use this for a fixed hybrid restorations. Like in this case, I have got 6 implants. The angulation was not so perfect, so I had to use those multi-unit abutments. Again, we had to make the impression with this impression coping, and then we got it casted, try-in the mouth, and I had to make a framework. The framework didn't fit really well because of the 6 implants were not so parallel, and of course we have some miscast procedures in the laboratory. So I had to try it in, and I checked where it wiggles or where it moves or rocks, and then I cut it, and then I put them back on both together, and then I use Duralay material, which is acrylic resin, red acrylic resin, to seal this part, and then take off, unscrew those 6 screws, unscrew the whole framework together as it is, and then send it back to the lab to solder this part. And then again I do another try-in for the framework before I fabricate my prosthesis. So this is another type of implant parts here, the Biohorizon. Again, same concept, same idea. So as I said earlier, sometimes we need to prep our abutments. Like the prosthetic abutment we got from the kit has a finish line, but sometimes we have to refine that finish line according to the gingival height, either intraorally or in the lab. Intraoral, we put back the abutment in the mouth, and then we prep it as we prep the normal tooth, but we have to be very careful because of the heat generation to that implant. In the Journal of Prosthetic Dentistry, I have, with my friend, I have we made an article, a small tip for the reader, what we call a device to hold the abutment, implant abutment for extra oral preparation. As I told you earlier, we either do it in the mouth or in the lab. So we got the abutments, we placed them in the cast, and then we had to refine the margin. We got the different sizes of prepared implant abutments over the tissue punch, okay? So we put the bigger size and the smaller and the smaller and so on, and we mark them. And then we hold that tissue punch and prepare the abutment. Then we placed it on the cast and to fabricate our final procedures. So that's available on the Journal of Prosthetic Dentistry back in 2009. Okay. لأن لما نمسك الاباتمنت وايد hard. When we hold the abutment directly with our fingers, it's going to be very hard when we prepare it. So we had to do something, to use something to hold the abutments with this tissue punching. Overdentures also have certain implant components that we need to use, what we call the locators, and to hold in the overdenture over the edentulous area. Now, for the lower, we usually use 2 to 4 implants for the mandibular denture to stabilize the denture. Again, according to how much bone we have. Sometimes we can go on with only 2 implants on the canine area, or just like so. The implant components, or the overdenture components we have is the clear protective disc. That's we put it on the top of the implant. We'll show you later on, and the inserts, and then we put the abutments. The most common locator we use nowadays, which I also like, is the Zist locator. That's almost universal for the most of the implant systems we have in the market nowadays in Kuwait. This is how it looks. This goes in the implant, and this goes on, that's what we see above the tissue. And it comes in different sizes. For the tissue level, that's the transgingival height. It comes in different sizes. Again, we have to, before we select the locator, we have to measure the gingival height after we remove the healing abutment. Okay, just like you pocketing the the locator comes in in many angles. One is the regular one, is straight, and then one which accommodates for, if the implants are really parallel, then we can use this one. But if we have some sort of angulations, we can use the extended range male parts, which gives us degree of angulation up to 20 degrees each side, so a total of 40. That's the extended range versus the dual retention, the regular one, which only gives الangulation بس 20 degrees. Okay, so we have to put it on first like this with a torque wrench, and then there's a video here. So again, I'm not sure why this is not working, but we have to go back to the video itself. Yep. Removing the healing abutment first, and then we will measure the tissue height. Accordingly, we can select our locator. As you can see here, this is the tissue height. We measure it over here from the implant platform to the height of the tissue. Then we can come back and put our locators. Okay? Okay. So after we measure the implant or the tissue height, we select our locator, we make our impression. In the denture, we have to mark the position of the implants in the denture and get them relieved so we can later on have the denture sitting on the implant without any contact to the implant. So we can use the PIP to mark where the implants are, the position of the implants, and then get it relieved. Then we mix the resin, then we flow the resin, and we shouldn't overfill it, we just flow it in the areas where we have relieved the denture, and then we put the denture on. This is the locator. So this is the locator in the mouth after we measuring, and that's the housing we put on top. Then we put the plastic or the nylon sleeve under that so we don't get the resin to flow underneath, because if the resin flows underneath this part, it's going to be very hard later on to remove the denture. We might need to cut off the denture after the setting of the acrylic resin. So this is how it looks in the final restoration. The resin has flowed in the around the, see there are some threads over here. The resin flows around the threads, so it gets the locator in the denture. So that's how it looks here. Two implant locators, complete denture on the maxilla, and complete denture, over denture on the mandible. That's another case. We had to put this implant sleeve because it's going to be very retentive, and the patient was an old guy, he couldn't remove it easily. So relieve, flow in the resin, and then pick up our locator. And that's the lower denture. There is another type of implant locators which is called ball and cap. I don't really use much now. It's the same concept. We put them in, and then you put the sleeves on top or the O-rings on the top, and then you pick them up with the GC pattern or the resin. That's the implant supported fixed prosthesis which I showed you earlier. That's the metal framework after I sectioned it, and then we solder it, and then we fabricate the acrylic resin on top of it, and denture teeth. You see the screw holes over here that I have blocked with composite resin. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry about the videos here didn't show very well. And this is my Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat, my Facebook, and my YouTube channel. I'll be very happy if you can visit my YouTube channel. Any questions, you can always ask me over the social media accounts or directly via my email. And thank you so much for attending today. Any questions? No questions? Good.
شايب ليش رد البرامج ما رد الجبهه